Textual Builder Supply is pleased to present you with this recording of the technical question that is listed in the title of this video.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
Hey, Beef Supply, this is Richard.
Hi, Richard. This is Cory. How are you doing today?
Good, yourself?
I'm doing pretty well. So let us delve in a little bit to some spring pivots. I do have a specific, like a order where a client ordered a Cal Royal and it failed on him. And I think it was probably because of the weight of the door. I'm still waiting for him to get me the actual weight of the door. But then I started thinking differences in quality, from the few options that we've got, and differences with applications and whatnot. So should I prep you with that order number, or is it kind of irrelevant?
No, I'd like to see the order number.
Okay, it's 230028. So they bought a Cal Royal, and as I recall, the customer said once the door guy started to install it, it sounded like something popped in the spring and it broke. And so I've been asking for a door weight and haven't gotten one. She just told me it's heavy and it's probably too heavy for her to pick up. So, I got pictures there and whatnot, so I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah, so it's actually quite poetic that this is the topic, because earlier this week I had a client call and we were discussing, the client ordered a Deltona Dash 95 from Amazon, and it does, I don't like being asked, I don't like when people knowingly ask me, they're cognizant of the fact they're asking me to provide tech support on something I didn't sell. It's
disrespectful.
Well,
to say the least.
It may be, but where I'm coming from is, well, when you called Amazon to ask for tech support, what did the world's largest retailer tell you? What were they able to provide? There's a saying somewhere in our industry about, it might, getting a better price today might be one thing, but what's the cost over time? So the point of that is, I had this customer ask me for tech support, and he has a Dash 95, and the Dash 95 is the Deltona version of the Bomber 7800 series, and in particular, I think it's a 7811 is what the Bomber would have been. And he said, hey, a couple of problems. I have, it's holding open. I don't want it to hold open. If I remove the rollers on the inside, will it work? And he also went on to say, and it's cracking really bad. So I told him, send me an email and I will research it. And I did. And there's actually a video live now on YouTube. If you search just for Dash 95, you'll see my findings. But the short version is, if you remove the rollers, it will completely hobble the unit. It won't work. There's no way to, short of exceptional measures, making it non-hold open. So it realistically can't be done. The cracking sound is a direct result of the way the thing was engineered and designed. I showed where that cracking sound is coming into play, and when the unit falls into its hold open position, the lobe that's connected to the spring, when it seats onto the rollers to stay in hold open, it's literally shifting in the horizontal spring assembly itself, and it's that slamming of metal, even though it's shifting by maybe 30 thousandths of an inch, not even the thickness of a thumbnail, but it makes that dramatic cracking sound because that lobe is under tremendous spring tension. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. So just a small amount of movement will make it sound as if, oh gosh, that's broken. So I then grabbed a Bomber 7813 off the shelf. Doesn't matter, it was a 7813. And I duplicated my original experiment and showed how the difference in design is such that there is no cracking. So it has everything to do with the quality of the engineering and the quality of design and construction. And I know the person whose name is on the template for the Bomber 7800 series. It's a technical term, what I'm about to say. I shot the shit with him for an hour. And I'm in contact with Stuart Jackson, formerly of Bomber, every few months or so because I have a technical question and he's gracious enough to answer. And that Bomber item is engineered in an absolute superior fashion, and that's also true of their other spring products, especially their LB4300C series. They had the best spring hinge on the market. And a fun story about that in terms of why your Cal Royal item failed. It's probably a piece of garbage in the sense of it should never fail. These horizontal spring pivots are known to last decades. I've seen them over 100 years old.
Oh wow.
So a fun story about the quality of the Bomber engineering is their spring hinges, their commercial, or their what they call their contract. It'd be like an LB 4310C 450 whatever color finish, and it's grade 1, so that means it's been tested to 1,000,000 cycles, as you may know, as you do know. And we were kind of joking about it. I says, well, what did it test to? When did the machine stop working? And he says, I don't know. I unplugged it at 7,000,000 cycles.
Wow.
So that's Stuart Jackson, Mr. Jackson. He's just awesome, and his name is on lots of patents. So it would be unfair to say the Cal Royal item is garbage. It's just, for sure, they're dancing around a patent on the original high quality item that is known to last decades. And I took a brand new Deltana made in Asia -95 off the shelf, and it's cracking. So under no circumstances would I accept that as a normal design. And it could have been just the one that I had in my hands, but I don't think so because the Bomber design is really different. So, for posterity's sake, if we were going to talk about, let's talk about what horizontal spring pivots are, and we're going to use Bomber as the our standard candle, so to speak. And whether it be Stanley with their BB159 maybe, or it be a Deltana, or it be other people that import these, they're all going to be a copy of this Bomber item. Though I can't say for sure if Bomber is the first company that made these, because I don't know. In this 1895 catalog, or this snippet out of a catalog, that's funny. I just bought one of these double acting floor pivots today on eBay for about $35 by McKinney. And it's known that McKinney was just buying their stuff, their Bomber, their horizontal spring pivots, which we have in stock still from McKinney. It's just a Bomber item. So I don't know if Bomber actually invented the material. Here's a catalog from, okay, that link doesn't work. I'll have to find out why. 1922, that doesn't work either. I'll have to find out why. Patents filed by Stuart Jackson. 92 pages of patents. So without going through this, let's go through this. This is a patent from 2008. He clearly made some sort of a change to the point where it had to be patented. So using Bomber as the standard, the first thing, and this is everything right here, this table. The first thing you have to know is how heavy is the door, and it's quite likely that the Cal Royal item is rated for the weight of the door, what your client has. Bomber had two HD versions. The only difference between these two is this chart really isn't perfect for telling you the difference, but the difference is one has a jam bracket and the other doesn't. So this 7805 the floor plate would attach here, and then you would screw it to the jam. You would do that if you can't pierce into the floor, radiant heat or whatever. So you would find that if you realized, oh, okay, everything's the same here except the part number. What makes the part different? You would just scroll down. With floor plate,
that's what gets you the additional capacity or weight capacity from 90 to 150, more or less the additional support, maybe?
If you went to the HD versions, it would. But those are really unusual, 150-pound doors in a residential application. It's unheard of. If you're trying to do a 3080, yeah, you would use this. But when it comes to these, the first question always is, how heavy is the door? So you're either at an 01 or an 02. The only difference is one's with a jam bracket. Or you're at a 90-pound door, these four here, without and with jam brackets. Hold open, non-hold open. Heavy duty versions, and these are non-hold open only. And then the only difference between the 21 and the 22 from the 11 to the 12 is the cover plates are made of brass versus steel.
Oh, okay.
So how heavy is the door? That puts you down one fork in the road. And then you could say, well, you want hold open or non-hold open? That puts you down another fork in the road. Then you can say, okay, where are you going to screw the bottom to, the floor or the jam? And then once you get that far, you may or may not have to talk about brass or steel trim plates. And, all of these items are the same in the sense that you can set tension by modifying that tension collar that's inside of there. And let's see, 7811, 600. Yeah, I've got some pictures.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's not a really good photo. Yeah, that's a really old image. The tension collar is right here, and you can just compress that spring when it's in a closed position. Anyway, the part that's cracking on that 7811, on that dash 95.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, right up, well, again, we don't have, let's see if it will be shown in the instructions. Don't have it there. Yeah, they actually don't show they don't show it, but where this lobe comes through, there's a slot cut in the top of the dash 95, and as this thing rotates, as the door swings in and out, that lobe has a pin, and that pin is riding in a slot up here, and it literally shifts in this direction when it goes into hold open, forcing that lobe to move violently in the other direction. And that pin is cracking against the sidewall of this top plate is what it is. So, it'd be really great to talk to Stuart Jackson and ask him about, hey, why, what made the Bomber engineering so good? And he'd probably just say, because, we've been a company for 140 years. But he's also, he is an engineer, he's a mechanic, he's everything. So it would be just a matter of having lower quality material available, would be my guess. But we've we've gone over the basics of a horizontal spring pivot, and I have the template that's here, which is already open, but let's look at it again. They're talking about putting an 1.5 inch radius on the edge of the door, and that's going to leave you with a quarter. If you have a 1/4 inch gap between the edge of the door and the jamb, they're still calling out an 1.5 inch radius. Well, I've taken that and I've put it into AutoCAD, and in a video I can show you exactly what that needs to be.
Is to the 1.5 inch.
Because a lot of, it's quite frankly, it's how we monetize the conversation.
Okay, so that's
what
the
what
object
does
looks
my
like
minimum
as
gap
rotated
have to be?
through.
Well, I can show you what it is. So what I've done here is I've just recreated the template, and
Copy.
you don't need a 1/4 inch over there, it turns out, and you may want a 1/4 inch because on the other side of the door,
Squeeze.
which I may or may not be showing, you're probably going to have a 1/4 inch. Yeah, well, so
1/8 of an inch.
right here I brought it down to 1/8 of an inch.
Let's
When
take our
you can
object,
have
let's
1/8 of an
rotate it.
inch and you'd be in good shape. The issue is, are you going to radius the opposite side
Sure, 1/8 of an
of
inch would
the
be
opening?
fine.
Because you probably want
this
both
logic, an
sides of
1.5
the
inch
door to look
radius.
the same. And that's the more technical aspect of a horizontal spring
1/16 of
pivot.
an inch would work
When
as
you have
well.
a finished opening, jam to jam and floor to head,
There you go.
what's my net door size? That's a really common question for people to have to ask. What's my net door size? And the template actually calls it out, or I think the installation instructions call it out, but you have to be savvy. Yeah, they do call it out actually. So they want 9/16 here, and then you're going to want an 1/8 of an inch here. So whatever your your finished opening is in height, you're going to deduct 11/16, and that's your net door height. Then whatever your clear opening is in width, depending on what you're going to do, are you going to radius? If you're not, leave a 1/4 inch on both sides. So if it's 36, or let's say 34, make it 33.5. And then you'll have a 1/4 here and a 1/4 here. If you're going to radius it, you can tighten it up to 33 3/4.
Okay.
Have you encountered horizontal spring pivots in your personal life?
I am sure I have, but have not noticed them at the time I have. I know we've talked about doors going to the kitchens, like the swinging type parlor doors sometimes, and but I have not encountered them since I have been adjacent to selling them.
Yeah, my earliest memories of going to my great grandparents' home, and my great grandmother lived until I was in my early 30s, and I was at my great grandmother's funeral, and I remember it well. And the home that they built in about 1943, my great grandparents, at 1801 North Natoma in Chicago, which is basically North Avenue and Narragansett, between Narragansett and Oak Park, just to the. It's 1800 North, so it's 2 blocks north of North Avenue. So the door between the kitchen and the dining room had a horizontal spring pivot on it. So I remember playing with that door constantly and noticing things about it, and could make it hold open, it could make it swing back and forth, and a real life
like
experience.
restaurants and stuff too.
Well, the problem with this used in a restaurant is it's really not grade 1. And what you're going to see mostly in restaurants, and very much in Chicago, is going to be the Bomber 3029 series. So back in the old days, it was extremely common for a contractor to walk in with a broken double-acting spring hinge that's decades old and just say in Polish or Italian or Greek, I need one of these, I need 2 of these.
Okay, give me one.
So this is what was primarily used in those restaurant applications. The problem with any spring is that you're not controlling the door. You might be closing it, but you're not controlling it. So my partner and I, back in the second half of the 90s, supplied material to our father-in-law's restaurant remodel, and my partner redid the kitchen, the door to the kitchen of the double acting, which had bomber 3029s. And I said, you know what would be nice is if you just put an overhead concealed closer there. And he did, and it worked great because it was a closer. It had hydraulic control. The mistake he made was he took a stave corridor, a lumber corridor. A lumber corridor would look like butcher block on the inside. In fact, it looks exactly like butcher block. And he just cut that without re-railing it properly, putting a solid piece of lumber. And he installed it, and yep, it's cracking, and it's the blocks of wood moving on the inside, so I had to pull the door down. The point of the matter is, hydraulic control would always be better if you could have an overhead concealed closer, or even a floor closer. But floor closer would be less ideal because you're going to be mopping. The floor is going to be constantly wet. It's a kitchen, so it's going to be nasty. Overhead concealed is really a great way to go.
Okay. So there was a question. We talked about the quality of bomber, and I noticed as we're talking about engineering was superior, and then I started making some notes. You mentioned that possibly they did better at the raw materials they used. So the question though, really that I'm thinking is the reason that no one else has picked up or can make something the same quality is because they're dancing around the patents.
Most definitely, and in fact, I approached Bomber about. Basically, I emailed Stuart Jackson and I asked him what machine was used to make a Bomber door bumper, and because I have a need for these. These are big, giant pieces of steel or stainless that go on usually a pair of doors, and they're bumper guards so that you can, like the Postal Service is going to use these. They'll be installed near the bottom of the door, and you just crash into it with your cart. And I literally emailed Stuart and said, Mr. Jackson, and said, what machine do you use? And he described it to me completely. He described what the problems were with manufacturing, and it was the spring back that you get on stainless steel that the problem was. Well, then I get an email from Charlie Martin that's longer than the Declaration of Independence. Actually, the Constitution is longer than the Declaration of Independence. It's that long. About, if I was interested in purchasing the intellectual property, blah blah blah, and I'm thinking, Charlie, make up 100 units, man. You still have the machine. Buy the raw material. Here's a PO. Well, I mean, we're dealing with 19th century technology. I'm not saying that it would be easy for me to replicate a fancy pipe bender, is what it is, I suppose, at the end of the day. But so the reason I say all that is because I inquired and I was answered with intellectual property. So I'm definitely thinking that there's something to that, and that they have to be quite careful. And I wouldn't know if Charlie Martin's a litigious person, but I would hope that he's eager to protect what's his.
Right.
Now, Charlie Martin, Mr. Martin, was very generous enough to give me a tour of both plants right before COVID, and he is the husband of one of the two granddaughter. Oh, pardon me. He is the husband of a granddaughter of one of the two brothers Bomber. They started in 1876, and Charlie Martin's still alive. So that just, it tells you, I think, a little bit about his age. But it's just interesting that a granddaughter I believe, is still alive that started Bomber.
Well, yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay. I think I covered most of the questions on that. It was a good little overview.
Yeah, the problem is, people are going to continue needing these. And the rest of the answer to the question is they probably didn't see enough profit in continuing to make 7800. Now, what's happened was my opinion about my opinion about why Bomber went out of business is because they failed to innovate, but they also they also were underpricing their products. So these gate springs that are in probably most every courtroom in the world, they were selling these for $125 each. Well, after they stopped making them, supply dried up. I would continue to find them, and I would have to mark it up so that I could be profitable and sell it. And there were times when I was selling these for $600 each because people just had to have them because there is no replacement. So failure to innovate, and plus I think he may have not priced the material based on how truly important they were in the building industry. So
as we're learning, the replacement cost of the Bomber is something that's not available.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what are you going to use for this? I don't know. He's been trying to sell the business or parts of it, and I guess other people have just decided there's no money there. My experience tells me it's low volume product, and the X in that variable is going to be what you have to sell it for to cover the fact that you have all this overhead to make a proportionately small amount of material.
Right.
So,
and then when lead
sure
times like quadrupled, then they couldn't get the product out to even make any money.
Yeah,
I guess that makes sense then. That's kind of a bummer. Didn't see the value in what they had that everyone does now. I mean, a lot of people did then too, I imagine. But yeah, it's interesting. That was what made them pretty nice to work with, though. Great quality. It wasn't too expensive. Quick turnaround
and the people at Bomber were just such sweethearts, all forever. And they also got out of the postal specialties business. They made the best mailbox in the world because. And I stood in the room where the manufacturing was done. Mr. Martin basically said we weren't gonna cheapen our quality just to compete with people that are willing to work on single digit markups. These mailboxes in Chicago is as common to Chicago as a Chicago hot dog is in Chicago, and there will be forever a need for these things. These 9040s is what they were. 9040s. They're everywhere in Chicago.
I still get calls on some of those and replacement parts occasionally. It's a dead end now, right?
It's a dead end. It's just, I don't know if I have any 9040s left in stock. And actually, I think a client called last year, and I remember telling him, you are literally getting the last one that exists. And we don't, there are none left in stock. Anyway.
Wow. Alrighty. Anything else you can think of special on Bomber? Or I think you hit on the good stuff.
Well, I mean, their catalog was quite awesome regarding the availability of their commercial grade hinges, and I always liked their product a lot. Bomber was in the spec for a lot of military stuff because they were the only manufacturer of American-made hinges. And I mean, it was made in America. The steel was made in America. The oil that they used in the manufacturing process was made in America. The pen that Anne used to write your name down on a piece of paper was made in America. So they got all that business from the Navy because it was made in the USA, no sub. And then the other fun fact, and here's our wide throw formula again, looking at it from Bomber. I was at their plating plant, and the fun fact, Bomber was so good at what they did. The wastewater from their plating plant was cleaner than the municipal water supply where the plating plant was located.
Wow.
Yep. He didn't say you could scoop down and drink it, but
right.
It's cleaner than what's coming out of the tap, and there was nothing wrong with the local water supply.
Wow.
Yeah. So it will remain a really good catalog resource, I think, because there's technical information in here that's really important to know, and it will forever be a yardstick by which we can say, what is a 2-knuckle hinge? What is a 3-knuckle hinge? And it's fun to also, I don't know if Bomber actually had lift-off or 2-knuckle hinges. I don't see any. But slip in and raised barrel and anchor hinges and swing clear and wide throw. And this would be a hospital tip. ligature resistant.
Oh, okay.
I had a client call today for 5x10 hinges, and started entering his order and gave him the total, and yeah, it was done. He was like, no, $180 a hinge, no. So too expensive. But this is the most important sheet out of their catalog, the how to order sheet. And once you understand this, you have their system figured out. Yeah.
Very cool, very cool. Let me think here. There was one question that just popped up to me and was fleeting. Yeah, I can't remember. If I remember it, I'll come back to it.
Yeah, 3-knuckle hinges are nice because they're cleaner aesthetically looking than all this busy intersection. I had a customer. He says, "Okay, I need to place an order." He says, "I need 6 5,000-400- whatever it was, and that is this hinge. It's just a plain bearing hinge, nothing special about it." He then went on to say, "I need 6 each of a 5,010-405- whatever the finish was." Now, a 5010 is a wide throw hinge by Bomber, and I said to him, "Why do you need that?" I says that's unusual to use those on the same door because one's 4-inch wide, the other's 5-inch wide. He's like, "Oh, you know what I need? I need 4 by 4.5, and I'm gonna take the leaves apart and put them together." And I said, "That won't work, because what Bomber did is they make their knuckle height different on a 5010 than they do on a 5,000, so you can't mate them." So I studied the problem and pulled in hinges from Stanley. I pulled in 5x5 and 5x4 and was able to give him what he wanted. Unequal leaf hinges. Uneven leaf hinges is what I've come to call them. Because they had a really unusual circumstance where what they were doing was jam, door, no, door, leaf. They were and they were applying a stop over that. They were standing the door proud of the frame like this, so you couldn't use a 4.5 because the leaf would only come to here on the frame, and you would miss the screw holes here. And they needed a longer leaf down here, so I was able to provide that with Stanley by swapping those out. The guy asked for 3 hinges yesterday. The same thing. I said, "Well, you can't have 3. You can buy 6 though, because you need to tear them apart and put them together." Meaning, you can have 3 hinges when you're done, but you have to buy 3 of each size in order to yield 3 each. Yeah, so it was kind of cool. The guy's like, "What can I do? What can I do?" And you're not really left with a lot of work here. Actually, his name was. I want to show you their original. Yeah, that's his name. I want to show you their original drawing since I've come down so far in the conversation.
If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it.
May as well, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Standing that door proud like that. So we did 5-inch tall because we couldn't get a 5-inch wide leaf, and that extra 1/2 inch allowed him to sneak that far enough back so we could run screws into here. And that's what we did. Works perfectly. No one will ever know, and it's awesome. Bomber said we intentionally do that because we don't want people mixing those leaves. Why? Who cares? Well, we've never tested it. Okay, all right. Everybody knows a wide throw hinge is not load rated, so all bets are off. If a client wants to Frankenstein your hinge leaves, isn't that kind of up to them? But
You just said something I didn't know. Wide throw hinges aren't load rated?
no, not at all. Not at all. You won't find a load rating for wide throw hinges, and I don't think you'll find swing clear you probably will. You have to check, but so when it comes to wide throw hinges, customers, we just did We just did a wide throw hinge for a fella in New York, and they were hanging like a 307 16 gauge door on like a 10-inch or even a 12-inch wide hinge. And I stock, as you may know, 5x10s and 5x12s, but they're only heavyweight because, I just don't know what you're going to throw at it in terms of weight.
If you need something that big, you might need a little bit of weight on it.
Yeah, overkill. Yeah, I know that they got that successfully installed, but you really got to be careful with clearances because that pivot point, when you kick it out like that, it really makes it weird. And if you look at WT BB1168 5x12s, I certainly have a video of me in AutoCAD showing what that has to be. It's kind of dangerous business with that,
Right.
because the gap really matters. And anyway,
I remembered my other question.
Hmm?
It was we mentioned American made for bomber, and so here's a question that popped up because these were spec'd for the Navy, and I think it was called very compliant before. But so is there no hardware that in this line, like the spring pivot type, that's actually American made? And if so, what does the government provide? I mean, what do they spec? Like, are things being replaced, or I'm just spitballing here.
Yeah, I've never seen a spec for a horizontal spring pivot, the 7800 series, and must be American made, no sub, because it's not sub. I've bomber material ends up on submarines. I'm quite sure of it, or used to. So a lot of where that spec also comes from is the people or persons writing the spec. Someone's deciding, this is what we want. And there will be an acquiescence of the owner or end user when what you want simply does not exist. They'll change their design, or they'll accept something that's... but if you're literally building nuclear subs, you're not filling it with Chinese-made hardware or Russian-made hardware. That's for sure a national security issue. And a hinge doesn't really so much matter, but what if it's a locking pin for their flux capacitor, and they won't be able to hit 1.21 gigawatts. So, I've had people, I will get a request for quote, and they'll say this is what it has to be, and I'll say it doesn't exist. He's like, great, quote what you can and put there, I'm quoting this because what you're asking for doesn't exist.
Okay.
And then that just gets run up the flagpole.
Okay. Yeah, it seems pretty similar actually with all the fire stuff.
Oh, you
people
bet.
want
Oh, my
something,
God.
and you tell them, sorry, it doesn't exist, or this is what we have to do to make it work. Here's the exceptions. Here's what you got to do. So okay.
Yeah, talk about nuclear submarines. I mean, that Ansel's got to be all over nuclear subs. I would think fire suppression by the world's leader is the military's got to be one of their biggest customers. Period.
Yeah, and like just a little, inside info, there are some parts of Ansel systems that they do not want exported going to people in the Middle East because there are parts on there that can be used in bad ways, so to speak. So yeah. there are certain parts that if we place an order for, they might ask us where it's going. Yeah. So yeah, very highly regulated.
It's funny is I asked that vendor that we use, that Heather went and personally visited, and I was asked what's the destination country for something. It was something pedestrian, but the question was asked. It could have been a weird derivative of that pedestrian item. It was a hose. Or it could have been completely unrelated. Just could have been someone saying, I wonder where that many of those are going.
Right, yeah. And I know there was some stuff with switches and electronics that were being harvested. This is probably 10 years ago now, but yeah, be that as it may. Interesting stuff. All right. I think we covered some good stuff.
All right. Keep your list going, and we'll use SD as a fallback.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you. Bye.
All right, bye.
Architectural Builders Supply hopes you have enjoyed this program. Please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.